So we go on. The 18th of July, the roads are a little bit flatter, 150 kilometres, taking them from Lourdes across to Pau. Normally in the Tour de France, Pau is the gateway to the Pyrenees. This time, it was the way out. Before leaving the religious centre of France, the riders did a circuit of the city. The major climb of the day, the Col de Marie Blanc. But as soon as the race got underway, the radio tour was announcing riders giving up, and they announced the abandon of the rider Guido Winterberg. There'll be more of those this day as well. But still in the yellow jersey, Claudio Chiappucci, who survived his most difficult day to keep his lead by just 5 seconds. Remember the day when it was once 10 minutes? The climb of the Col de la Marie Blanc, the crowds again had turned out in their tens of thousands. They were waiting for the moment when the yellow jersey would change shoulders. But this time the field, in the beginning at least, stayed largely together. The yellow jersey riding well, never far from the race lead. There were always those willing to test, to attack and hope they could escape. There was really now only a handful of riders left in this race for the final kill in Paris. Others were looking for the stage win. After all, every day was a big prize day if you could win the prize money. Over the top of the Col de la Marie Blanc, the field were all together. All that mattered, that was, and Greg LeMond was feeling in buoyant mood. 5 seconds off the lead, and no pressure yet to defend the yellow jersey. That was still the priority of Claudio Chiappucci. But this day wasn't to be quite as simple as that. There are other things in the world apart from the human body, like punctures, and Greg LeMond was going to get one very shortly that could well change the face of this Tour de France. On the way down the Marie Blanc, Greg LeMond has a flat tyre. He is now in big trouble. He was left on the roadside with no team around him, no team car to help him, and he stood there for 3 minutes. The field ahead raced on. Eric Breukink was now having a chance to pull back time he'd lost earlier in the Pyrenees. Marino Lageretta was still a real challenger in this race. Andy Hampsten, who wouldn't attack Greg LeMond necessarily, was now in the front group as well. Gilles de Lyon. They were all here now, all thinking of gaining ground over the bad luck of Greg LeMond. Pedro Delgado was driving the pace too. Urs Zimmermann, Massimo Girotto, all of the teammates here of Claudio Chiappucci were driving the pace. Strangely, at the time of the puncture, there had been a small breakaway, and LeMond's teammates were in that leading group. They'd now been ordered back to await their stricken leader. They're not allowed to turn round and go back towards the race. That is totally against the rules. So they were ordered to stop and wait on the roadside by the team manager, Roger Leger. LeMond comes up at high speed. His team now were dragging him back into the race. It was a marvellous exhibition of team riding. Greg LeMond was being paced back up to the lead pack of Claudio Chiappucci by his teammates. Had this happened a year ago, LeMond may never have rejoined the leaders because only one rider in his team finished alongside him, Johan Lammerts. So, on a day when LeMond got a scare, he came back into the race leader frame, and then the little men were allowed the chance to win the stage. It's always a poor phrase to use, little men. Anybody that wins a stage in the Tour de France is a great cyclist, and this was also an historic day down in Pau. On the left of the screen, Dmitry Konishev became the first Soviet rider ever to win a stage of the Tour de France. He beat Tour first-timer Johan Brunel. In third place, the Canadian Steve Bauer, 11 seconds back, and the fourth place sprint was won by Jean-Claude Colotti. And so to stage 18, 202 kilometres, heading out to Bordeaux, the hot flatlands. At the start of the stage, Greg LeMond was busy telling the press how unhappy he was that Claudio Chiappucci had chosen to attack him when he was stricken by a puncture. He said it simply wasn't sporting. So there seemed to be a little bit of rivalry beginning between Greg LeMond and Claudio Chiappucci, and it wasn't just a sporting one. Traditionally, Bordeaux is the hottest part of France. The riders were ready for that. And Greg LeMond, of course, was thinking now of the time trial when he hopefully would take the race lead. Stephen Roche takes a letter in from home, others make telephone calls, and Greg LeMond, for the moment at least, the pressure is off. And so the bunch rolled along fairly much together for all of the day, until they came close towards the finish, and the Australian Phil Anderson was out to try and win the stage. A small group developed at the head of the field and was gradually picking up strength in numbers. Phil Anderson was the animator. But the main field was always hunting them down. Claudio Chiappucci had had a painless day. He never allowed Greg LeMond out of his sight. After all, a 5-second gap, that could be so easily taken at any time if you don't shadow your man. Coming towards the finish, a small breakaway group did develop. Surprisingly, Gianni Bugno, the winner at Alpe d'Huez, was the inspiration of the move, taking with him his teammate Roberto Gusmeroli and also Eric Breking. Just ahead of the main field, it was the Italian Bugno who wins his second stage. Eric Breking finished second, and he makes an amazing 18-second gain, which could be important over all of the Tour leaders, led home here by Giovanni Fidenza. Stage 19, 102.5 kilometres. And again, between Castillon and Limoges, nothing really was expected to happen. The riders were now becoming very keyed up for the final time trial, the big showdown between Greg LeMond and Claudio Chiappucci. The green jersey being worn here by Olaf Ludwig in his first Tour de France is awarded to the most consistent daily finisher. He'd won one stage and he'd taken part in many of the bunch sprints near the front in others. LeMond takes time out to have a chat with Tour organiser Jean-Marie Leblanc, himself a former Tour rider. All these things were the sign that there was not going to be a lot of action from the leaders this day. LeMond even had time for a mechanical problem as well. And by picking his way through the convoy, he soon rejoins the field. And then a late breakaway and a fine piece of solo riding by Guido Bontempi of Italy. His vast experience and his recovering from injury, he's realised the leaders are taking a sort of day off. He's broken clear and wins the stage by 1 minute and 28 seconds. The Carreras are having a great tour. The lead with Chiappucci and now a stage win. So too the penultimate day of the Tour de France, a time trial around Lac de Vassivière, the beautiful centre of the Limoges countryside. It's a ride of 45.5 kilometres. Greg LeMond knows he must perform this day better than ever before to win the leader's yellow jersey. The same could be said of Claudio Chiappucci, who has to keep the leader's yellow jersey. During 3 weeks, Claudio Chiappucci has become a great star. He's all set now to win the Tour de France. All that prevents him is the time trial, 45.5 kilometres. The time trial is a mass of concentration. Raul Alcala here is ready for the off. Already the winner of one time trial in this year's Tour de France, Raul Alcala is the only Mexican to ever win a stage of the Tour de France. He's won one this year, and he won one last year in Belgium at Spa-Francorchamps. And so far at all of the time checks, he's all set now to win another one. Raul Alcala approaches the finish with a great time. It's the fastest so far, and he crosses the line with a time of 1 hour, 3 minutes and 8 seconds. Pedro Delgado will not be aware of what Alcala has done as he sets off. Delgado needs a very good performance to beat this rider, Eric Breukink. They're fighting out now at least the third place on the podium in Paris. Eric Breukink sets off too. Jan Gispers, his team manager, cheers him all of the way. Delgado is down at the time checks to Breukink. He's going to have to find an extraordinarily good finish to beat the Dutchman. With a ride of 1 hour and 5 minutes, Delgado knows that won't be good enough to beat Dutchman Eric Breukink. And when Eric Breukink comes up to the finishing line, he's recording the best time of the day so far. 1 hour, 2 minutes and 40 seconds, 28 seconds better than Raul Alcala. That surely now has confirmed the top 3 finish in Paris. Unconcerned about the rider Breukink are these two men. They are in a personal battle for yellow, and Greg LeMond starts ahead of Claudio Chiappucci. Greg LeMond knows the circuit. He also has happy memories here because in 1985 he won his first ever stage of the Tour de France around this very course. On that occasion he beat the legendary Bernard Hinault. Hinault, of course, going on to win the Tour de France and Greg LeMond to finish second. Claudio Chiappucci departs behind Greg LeMond. Both leaders are now on course. The Europeans call this the race of truth. There's no hiding behind anybody. There's no saying you feel ill. There's no blaming anything at all. Only your legs. Greg LeMond was rapidly into his stride. His time checks were good and consistently faster than Claudio Chiappucci's at every time check. Greg LeMond knew by the support from his following car he was now racing to the yellow jersey of the Tour de France just 24 hours before the finish. Approaching the finishing line, Greg LeMond was well outside the winning time of Eric Breukink, but it was a time of 1 hour, 3 minutes and 37 seconds. It should be a lot better than Claudio Chiappucci. The media move in for the kill as well, and LeMond was having none of it. And sure enough, Claudio Chiappucci approaches the finish riding his last day in the Tour de France in the yellow jersey. His time, 1 hour, 5 minutes and 58 seconds, 2 minutes, 21 seconds slower than Greg LeMond. And so, the famous four riders who dominated this race from day one, were now all behind the new leader, Greg LeMond of the United States. In yellow, and one day to come. A train journey to the outskirts of Paris will start the final stage of 182.5 kilometers from Bretigny to Paris in the shadow of the Arc de Triomphe and of course the famous Eiffel Tower. The whole field comes into Paris together. Nobody is behind the race and nobody in front. You know, when the riders finally see the Eiffel Tower, everyone will tell you they break out in large goose pimples. They are so motivated after a long 3 weeks in the saddle. What they fear most is being dropped from the peloton in the view of the world on the famous Champs-Élysées. but the field stays together. As time after time it goes up and down the most sacred cobbled roads in the world. Greg LeMond is in yellow, Claudio Chiappucci is in second place, Eric Breking is in third place. And the Z team of Greg LeMond makes sure he has no problems. They dominate the head of the field. Lap after lap of the Champs-Élysées, the pace is kept so high nobody can escape off the front. Eric Breking rides behind Greg LeMond, Claudio Chiappucci on the far side of him. These are the men who've been the stars in this year's Tour de France, and this day wasn't going to change anything. Greg LeMond, the first American to win the Tour de France in 1986. He did it again so dramatically last year by 8 seconds on this very road in a time trial when he beat Laurent Fignon, and now this year he's going to win again. Guarded by his faithful teammate, Gilbert Duclos-Lassalle, number 4. Everybody wants to win the final stage of the Tour de France on the Champs-Élysées in Paris. It's normally reserved for the sprinters, those greyhound of men who can usually go faster than anybody else at any time. And so it was to prove. In the big sprint finish, Johan Museeuw, who'd won the stage at Mont Saint-Michel on the Normandy coastline, was home again. This time, he was finishing ahead of Adriano Baffi, the Italian, who tried so hard to win a stage, and he'd never quite got there. And so the American Greg LeMond has won his third Tour de France, and this is the result. Greg LeMond of the United States and the French Z team, the 3,400 kilometers in 90 hours, 43 minutes and 20 seconds. A superb average speed of 37.519 kilometers an hour. In second place, and he'll never be the same again, he'll always be a star now, Claudio Chiappucci of Italy and Carrera, 2 minutes 16 seconds behind LeMond. Eric Breking from the Netherlands and the Dutch PDM team, 2 minutes 29 seconds back. Pedro Delgado, third last year, he finishes fourth this time from Spain, 5 minutes and 1 second behind. And fifth, the most consistent stage race rider in the world, Marina Lajareta of Spain, 5 minutes 5 seconds back. And in sixth place, Eduardo Chozas of Spain at 9 minutes 14 seconds. And so for the second year running, Greg LeMond on the Champs-Élysées wears the leaders and the winners' yellow jersey. The Tour de France, he feels, is his by right. He's always inspired when he rides it. And yet all of the season this year, no one would have bet on Greg LeMond to win the Tour de France. Once the race started, then you'd been a fool if you didn't. Eric Breking on the right, the rider who has finally been persuaded into riding a good Tour de France. He joined the Dutch PDM team this year under the guidance of Jan Gispers, and he's come up with a great ride to take third place. And Claudio Chiappucci, a superstar this year, a man who started showing great form in Paris-Nice when he won the King of the Mountains back in March, and this year, after that first day breakaway, has finished in second place. The victorious team of the Tour de France 1990, Greg LeMond, and the riders who helped him win the most coveted trophy in world cycling. And as Greg LeMond would be the first to say, you need a team and you can't win without them.